News Radio 700 WLW.
Shrinkflation. We've all noticed it. I don't care if you're going to a restaurant, you're going to the grocery store, you've seen it.
Yes, and it's instead of increasing the price of something, they keep the price the same, but just don't give you quite as much. And I guess there's a big lawsuit going on with Arby's, where people are accusing Arby's of kind of not being forthright with the size of their items.
Yeah, it's a class action suit that's being filed. And here to discuss, our good friend, the patent professor, John Rizvi. Now, John, we were talking about it earlier. This has become so prevalent, man, with people, lowering portion sizes but not the price because they don't want to charge more money because people are up in arms about that right now.
Yeah, so, and we've seen different variations. There's the classic puffery, which is some of that's to be expected. We've seen a lot of lawsuits where you have consumers claiming that the way the burger looks in the advertising is not the way it actually is. Yeah. And some of those are ridiculous, right? Because the burgers in the advertising, they look amazing. They've got steam coming out from them. It's not going to look like that. And it's what does the reasonable consumer expect? And that's generally the test. And if people expect a certain amount of puffery, then that's permissible. That's why you have businesses allowed to say world's best whatever, world's best chocolate cake, and they don't necessarily expect that to be realistic. But when businesses make specific claims, for example, Subway has the foot-long their sub, right. And they were sued because their sub was not a foot long, and Subway tried to claim that consumers know it's all puffery, and the courts didn't buy it. They said, listen, if you're talking about something general, yes, consumers might expect exaggeration, but when you pick a specific dimension and say foot long, it's reasonable to expect that consumers would think it's a foot long. But this is even more sinister on the part of businesses because, as you said, if they raise the price, people will notice. So they don't raise the price and they reduce the size just an imperceptible amount so that nobody can tell. In the case of the lawsuit against Arby's, the claim is that they got rid of the kid size fries and they basically made the kid size the small became the medium, and the medium became the large, and consumers just didn't know. As a matter of habit, they go in and they'll order a small, a medium, a large, and maybe not even notice it, whereas if Arby's did it up front and raised the price, then it would be at least the consumers would have a chance to make a decision and decide if they really want to purchase or not.
So this hasn't gone through court, but what could Arby's have done to even prevent this from going to court? Should they have come out and issued some statement that probably wouldn't have been seen anywhere, but just to cover their behind, say, hey, look, we're going to kind of adjust the size of our fry baskets here? Is that how they should have done it?
Yeah, well, some companies we've seen, they make it really straightforward. Like you'll see potato chips sold in, they'll say 100-calorie pack, right? So that way, and that's like consumers get alerted that, hey, there's something different here, and then they'll pay attention to the size and realize that this is not a normal size bag of potato chips. It's a 100-calorie pack. For sodas, we've seen the cans go from 12-ounce cans to 7.5-ounce cans of soda. But the beverage companies are really upfront about that. They call them mini cans, and they have that on the packaging. Now, a sneaky way to do it, if not so upfront, if instead of 12 ounces, they just switched and started selling 11-ounce cans. It doesn't seem like a big difference when you're talking about one can of soda, but it's an incredible amount of profit when you're selling millions and millions of cans to provide 1 ounce less and have it sold as 11 ounces. And if you don't mark the packaging, who picks up the can of soda and actually looks at how many ounces it is? And businesses know this. Consumers don't look at that. They don't count the number of fries. They don't, if it's a standard package of something that they've been purchasing for years, they never look at the size. When's the last time you bought a gallon of milk and actually looked to see that it said a gallon? Now, instead of raising the price, what if companies change that label to 0.9 gallon or 0.8 gallon, and it's in the fine print in the label? Nobody would notice it, and you might buy milk thinking that it's the same price as it's always been, and then find out, no, that there's been perfect term for it, by the way, shrinkflation. It's a hidden way of raising prices in the hope that consumers wouldn't catch it.
The PAD professor, John Rizvi, is our guest. And John, you brought up chips, and Rocky and I were talking about this before we talked to you. And let's say that, whatever, Lay's, they have, whatever their standard bag, not the party size, but their regular bag of potato chips. Now, can they use that same bag size, but instead of it being, 10 ounces of potato chips, make it 8 ounces of potato chips, speaking of puffery, and to have the same, you puff it up a little bit
like
with air.
The same bag.
Looks like you're buying the same size bag, but you just didn't pay attention to the fact that there's a couple of less ounces of chips in there. Can they do that?
Yep. They can. And, unfortunately, it's all,
wow.
So these companies, they follow their labels have to list the ingredients. They have to tell them what it is. They have to list nutritional facts, so where the laws specify, but there's nothing that says that they can't change the size of their how many chips, how many ounces of actual chips there are, and that's why you guys are exactly right. You'll find these bags that look like they're 80% air, and when you open them up, the chips don't even take up the entire contents. There's no law that says that they have to make the packaging equal to the product. You will find sometimes they'll say things like products may settle during shipping or whatever, like just so I guess they don't get some irate customer that says, well, wait a minute. But they are covering themselves, because if the consumer looks at the label, it will tell them exactly how many ounces of product they have. The reality is that consumers don't do that. We don't have the time. They often just are not looking at it that way. You'll find some grocery chains start listing prices not just by when they have a price, they'll also tell you a per unit cost as well. So to give the savvy consumers the ability to kind of figure out what they're paying for if don't want to break out with a calculator in the stores. But none of this is mandated by law. This is just certain chains deciding to do that. But until manufacturers take it on themselves, or there's a law that requires that if there's a change in size, that there has to be some kind of alert. It can't just be hidden in the fine print on the label. So if a can of soda goes from 12 ounces to 11 or 10 ounces, the beverage manufacturer should label it something, bring it to the consumer's attention. And they've done a really good job of that. When the cans have gone from 12 ounces to 7.5, they start labeling them mini cans. But on the other hand, the flip side of that is a lot of people would say, yeah, of course they have to, because that's such a big change that every consumer would notice that even without the label. Like when you first see the mini can, it's not the regular full-size can of soda. But if they just went to 11 ounces or 10 ounces, you very well could miss that unless the manufacturer, the beverage companies brought it to your attention.
So in the case of this one, Arby's, how do you see this playing out in court?
Yeah, well, I do believe it's going to settle. I don't think we're going to get an actual decision on it, and unfortunately, I don't think this is going to create any new precedent or law that requires companies to do it. The only hope is, I believe that the negative publicity from Arby's doing this is going to be what holds companies back, because they don't want their company associated with shrinkflation. And this change has actually hurt Arby's in a sense because they're arguing we have the meats slogan is kind of become a mockery because as it turns out, if they're reducing their portion sizes, then it just is hurting their advertising campaign. It was an incredibly successful advertising campaign until this lawsuit, and the publicity is not something that Arby's wants or any company wants. So that's really going to be what's deterring companies from doing this as opposed to an actual law that says you can't change the size of your product.
All right. Well, John, it would be really curious to see how this all plays out eventually and how shrinkflation plays itself out eventually. We can only watch and see. John, thanks so much. People want to find out more about you. Where can they go?
Yeah, so our brand is The Patent Professor. So anywhere on social media, type in The Patent Professor, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you'll find us there. Our website is thepatentprofessor.com.
All right. Thanks so much, buddy.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.